it in the glue, dip it on the bee, and then put the little tag on it.
And how long does it stay on?
So these stay on pretty well. I would say like maybe like 1 in 200 could be yanked off, but I did study the temperature one I was talking about before. I marked over 2,000 bees, and that one seemed like most of them stayed on pretty well.
Is it similar to what they put on the monarch butterflies?
I'm not sure. I don't know what that is, yeah.
So have you come away with an opinion on colony collapse disorder as to whether or not neonicotinoids have a major role, a minor role, even though there may be compounding factors like the varroa mite, if they become exposed to imidocycloprids, is that going to be the death knell? So
Yeah, well, so I guess I haven't read a ton on this, but in my like honeybee biology class, we talked about it a little bit. And it seems like it's just one of the, like another thing on top of it all. I don't think it's like necessary. It might be the straw that breaks the camel's back, but I don't think it's like, you know, the hay bale. So I think it's probably a little bit of a factor, but I don't think it's like the defining factor of colony collapse disorder. But I could be wrong, and I think there probably is follow-up research after I took that class that could disprove me.
So mites always been a problem, or is this more recently with hives that have been infected with pesticides so their immune system isn't big enough, strong enough to ward this off? And what is it that would attack or take care of the mites so they wouldn't even be there?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think the mites were introduced into America in about 1982, and so before that they weren't an issue here. And mites are actually native to the Asian continent. So there's an Asian honeybee, the Serana, that deals with mites, and they actually don't have nearly as much of a problem with mites. They can survive with mites much better. So the Apis mellifera, I think, really struggles with it a lot more. But when it was introduced, it was took a huge fall. It was a big deal. What was the rest of your question?
So is there a natural envy of the mites?
Right, okay, yes. So I don't think so, because it would be hard to introduce something to the colony that the bees wouldn't immediately kill, that could control the mites. So I think the chemical and maybe the fungus stuff that you were talking about could be really cool, but I definitely haven't heard of any like biological control agents for the mites. But it could be.
Anything of using other bees from Asia that can ward off mites to help sustain?
That's a good question. I think that the different subspecies don't interact with each other well. I think honeybees tend to be very, very territorial, or not very, very, but pretty territorial, and so they recognize when they're intruders, and they wouldn't be very receptive to having someone in there even if they were helping out.
did you use oxalic acid fumigation for mite control?
So I've used that in a couple. I didn't use that on the, none of these were treated this year. These were all maybe treated last year, but maybe not even, because we have a ton of colonies and we have a lot of mite researchers, so we need a lot of mites. But I think our main form of control is formic.
Formic acid?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any ideas on the survivability of natural honeybee populations as opposed to populations that are monitored by apiarists? We used to have some colonies in Iowa before we moved, and the state apiarist there said that he didn't think there were any wild hives of honeybees in Iowa because varroa mites would take them down eventually.
Right. That was a really common opinion when varroa mites were first introduced, because they had such a huge effect on managed colonies that pretty much everybody was of the belief that no more colonies existed in the wild, because how could they exist in the wild when they could barely exist with people helping them out? But that's actually my advisor, Tom Seeley. He wrote a book, Following the Wild Bees, where at least in Ithaca, New York, he was able to, he put out a little bit of a sugar source, and he would legitimately follow the bees. He would watch where they go and move the sugar source to where he thought they went and follow them all the way back to their hives. And he was able to track their hives in the Arnott Forest. So there are definitely still feral colonies, and some that we know exactly where they are in the Arnott Forest, but I'm not sure about in Iowa, and I'm not sure about all over. I know that there's a lot of there's a lot of killer bee colonies that are just kind of in the desert that have swarmed, but yeah.
So, maybe I missed it, but why were the mites introduced?
Well, so there was no, it was a mistake. kind of classic. They actually haven't been introduced in Australia yet. The entire continent of Australia still doesn't have varroa mites, so they're very, very like particular about what they bring in. Their quarantine process is really strict, but ours just let them through because they're small and they can reproduce asexually. So they're really, yeah, very sneaky.
I read something about these coming from Siberia specifically, and I thought that sounded weird, like that sounds so cold, but that had mites. And is that true? And when you say Asia, I don't know, you're talking about
Yeah, interesting.
huge.
I honestly don't know. I think that Apis cerana definitely has a really big range, so it could have been those bees. And if they were brought in because
Why? Why were they brought in?
yeah, I'm not sure. I would assume that maybe it would be because people thought that they would be better with mites, but I haven't heard
Bees
about
would be there with mites?
the Asian bees deal with the mites better because they evolved with the mites, so the mites don't take down their colonies entirely. They're just kind of a minor nuisance versus here it's kind of like a huge problem. So the Asian bees might be better at dealing with the mites, and that's why they would bring them here. But I don't know that for sure.
When you mentioned that Obama law with the livestock, 8 hours of transportation, is there any other aspects of it? Are the bees supposed to rest for 2 hours, or do you have any more
I don't know that.
specifics on that?
I don't have a lot of specifics. I'm not I don't transport bees, but this was like kind of relevant to one of the studies I was doing. So I would assume it would be at least an hour break, but then again, for bees, that's not that helpful. So it's kind of the question of what do you do with the transportation issue, because it's pretty stressful.
So did the mites piggyback on these Asian bees, or do they come on plants, or how did they actually get into the country?
Oh, so into the country, I'm not sure. I'm sure they just came in on somebody like bringing a hive over, because I think they got to Europe first. So they weren't I don't think they were in Europe or the United States, but they managed to come over from Asia into Europe, probably on bees that were just transported. People transport bees everywhere. And then people were probably transporting their colonies from Europe to America and managed to bring in a mite or two, and it just kind of blew up. I had another point on that. I forget it. What was, that's good, okay. Yeah.
All right, so you mentioned that there's the typical arms race going on where you get a treatment for the mites and then 4 or 5 years, is that what you think the cycle
Right,
is?
sometimes it's even faster than that, it's pretty
Okay,
crazy.
so do you know what the current best treatment is for mites and hives, or is it?
Yeah,
a
so
moving target?
I think it's pretty interchangeable. I think the ones I've heard about the most are formic acid and oxalic acid. But I'm not an expert on this at all. I definitely know there's some other ones that people use, but I think a lot of the ones that a lot of them have gone out and just don't work anymore. So those are the two that I have used and know about using. Yeah.
All right, well. So thank you for coming out tonight. Jordan's going to hang out if you have questions that you would like to ask her. The gallery's open. You're welcome to go into the gallery and check it out, or just sit around and chat. So thanks for coming out tonight.
Thank you.